Scott has today launched its all-new Addict RC, an impressively integrated and, much to my surprise, disc-only update to its all-round, long-standing road bike. Save for the addition of discs in 2016, this is the first major update the bike has seen since 2014. The original Addict was launched in 2008, and at the time it was one of the lightest carbon road bikes on the market. And if you were to ask me what I assume the Addict would be, it is indeed that, a lightweight bike. It is a hill climber special. Lightness is still one of the key focuses for the Addict, and the presentation for the bike included all the usual tropes around improving stiffness, improving comfort, and improving the aero qualities of the bike. But more than anything, integration is the real selling point of this new bike. The heart of this integration is the Syncross Creston IC-SL cockpit. This impressive one-piece cockpit routes all of the cables and hoses on both mechanical and electronic drivetrains, all the way from the shifters, through the bars, into the stem, and eventually into the head tube. So by that I mean from the shifters to the derailleurs themselves, there's absolutely no cables visible. Everything then goes into the fork, where it's routed through your usual kind of foam guides in the frame itself. One-piece cockpits are often kind of criticised for being less comfortable than the traditional counterparts. And to improve comfort, Syncross claims it's basically shrunk, as in vertically, at the stem itself, which allows a little bit of kind of fore and aft, up and down flex, which provides some damping qualities, but they've also made it a little bit broader, which is said to improve stiffness when you're out of the saddle, giving it 10 zillion watts. The profile of the bar itself, that kind of V shape it makes towards the stem, is also said to improve the strength of the bar, as it allows Syncross to align the fibres better along the length of the cockpit. A smattering of high modulus fibres are also used throughout the bar to tune feel. In terms of weight, the whole cockpit is claimed to only weigh 295 grams in an unspecified size. This is actually a pretty impressive figure for a one-piece cockpit, and it does so while including replaceable hardware, which gets a big thumbs up from me. It's worth noting that the top cap we're showing in these photos is not a production example. It looks a little bit rough around the edges, and the texture isn't quite the same as the cockpit itself. But come production, it'll look a lot cleaner, and it'll be held in place with a magnet, so you won't have that little bolt on the top. So on cheaper bikes, you will not have this one-piece cockpit, and it is instead replaced with the IC-SL 1.5 cockpit, which is a more traditional bar-stem combination. But that's where tradition ends, and this arrangement actually has a pretty nifty trick up its sleeve. As far as I'm aware, this is the only integrated of sorts cockpit which allows you to change the stem length without disconnecting hoses or cables. Now this begs the question, why should you even care about these handlebars? I've not even talked about the bike yet, which I think is quite a telling thing, and Scott certainly really dwelled on this cockpit for the majority of the product presentation. Again, I'm going to come on to what they've done to improve the bike, but the message from nearly every brand out there with each new generation of bike is that it's getting lighter, stiffer, more aero, and more comfortable. When this is the message coming from every brand, something needs to be done to differentiate your products from the rest. And in Scott's case, they are pushing integration as their big thing. There's some impressive tech which has gone into the frame, and I'm going to come on to that, but really, integration is the key message here. And you're going to see this integration on every single level of the new Addict RC. Now on to the next exciting point. Yes, I did indeed mention the bike is disc only. The sale of bikes is now so heavily skewed towards disc brakes in the road market that it's not really that surprising that Scott would choose to ditch rim brakes. But on the other hand, the Addict is this really classic lightweight platform, and it's a bit of a hill climbing specialist. So I kind of imagined Scott was going to continue to service this admittedly niche part of the market with the new bike. However, when I asked Scott why they had limited the bike to only disc brakes, the answer was a little bit more nuanced than just reduced market demand. Basically, it explained that to meet all of their design goals with the new Addict, to incorporate rim brakes as well as disc brakes would essentially result in designing two separate bikes. Now that will obviously take up a huge amount of engineering resource, very valuable engineering resource, which I slightly got the impression was taken up by other interests within core parts of their bike business. More bikes. So there you have it. The arrival of disc brakes truly is an unstoppable tide now, and I'm sure you're going to let me know how much that upsets you in the comments. Along with disc brakes, undoubtedly the next big thing in road bikes is wider tyres, and all of the new Scott Addicts are compatible with 28mm wide tyres when mounted to 21mm wide rims. And all production bikes from Scott will come with 28mm tyres as standard. As a side note, it's actually really rare for a brand to quote rim width when quoting tyre compatibility, so hats off to Scott here for being thorough, because this is the sort of stuff which can be so annoying if you're a consumer and don't have this information. Increasing tyre volume will fractionally raise the whole bike up a smidgen, so to counteract this, Scott has very fractionally lowered the bottom bracket height on the new Addict to counteract this. In terms of geometry, the bike is a little bit more aggressive than the outgoing Addict, which it's now dubbing as an endurance model, which is quite funny given it was a race bike until this bike was announced. But nonetheless, the geometry has been developed in conjunction with the Mitchelton Scott Pro team and Rablador, which is a very famous fitting lab which has this huge database of tons and tons of data, and they claim to have mined through all of this to come to the perfect race bike geometry, supposedly. The new bike is also built around an industry not standardized, now standard D-shaped seat post, and this is the same shape as used on the foil, but on the new Addict it actually is a lighter weight version of that post. This is held in place by this really cool ultra lightweight seat clamp, which is so much easier to use than wedge style seat clamps that we're often seeing on these style of bikes. This seat clamp is claimed to weigh just 12 grams, and really it is so much easier to use, and I cannot stress how delighted this makes me, and I really hope to see that design carried over to Scott's new bikes. The profiling of the tubes and the overall construction of the bike has also been changed, and in terms of aero qualities, at 45 kilometers an hour, which is obviously a speed we all ride around at all the time, the bike is claimed to save 6 watts compared to the outgoing model. In terms of construction, the overall number of parts which make up the frame itself has reduced from 6 to 3, which results in less joins, which again results in a stronger frame supposedly, and also reduces weight. And the entire system weight for the bike, so that includes your seat clamp, your fork and everything else, is claimed to be just 1,695 grams in an unspecified size. Before I get into my brief overview of the Addict range, it's worth mentioning that the current generation of the Addict and its gravel, cross and women's derivatives will still be available going forward. So essentially the Addict RC is best viewed as your all-out race bike, the current Addict is really your kind of all-day endurance bike, and then the women's cross and gravel bikes fill up the rest of the niches. I'm not going to bore you by listing the full specs of the range overview. I've already had to do that for BikeRadar.com, and if you want that information, check the link in the video description. What I can tell you though, is that the top-end bike comes with a SRAM Red ETAP AXS group set, a smattering of beautiful carbon components, including that aforementioned synchronous cockpit, and it is claimed to weigh just 6.9 kilograms. And yes, that is a claimed weight. Please chastise me for forgetting scales once again in the comments, because I'll never learn otherwise. In terms of ride impressions, I'm actually not going to dwell on these too much. Riding for 50 kilometers on the glass smooth, beautiful roads around Scott's HQ in Freeburg was very delightful, but honestly, it didn't really tell me much I didn't know already about the bike. Yes, it is light, it's stiff, it's fast, it's relatively comfortable, but I pretty much could have told you that by looking at the spec sheet. It's a top-end bike with top-end components and some go-fast wheels, and it's a well-proven bike. Scott is not going to churn out a bad bike, and none of that should come as a surprise. What will really determine how the bike performs, in my opinion, is how easy that integration is to live with, particularly on the cheaper bikes with those kind of removable fascias. Like I said, there's so many bikes like this coming out at the minute, and they are largely the same. They're not bad bikes, but they are all largely the same. And what differentiates them is the kind of unique features manufacturers build into them. And again, that integration is Scott's big selling point. With that said, I will stress, 50k on wonderful Swiss roads was a very pleasant experience, and probably more so for being on such a lovely bike. If you're buying a very top-end Addict with that smattering of beautiful components, it's very, very unlikely to disappoint. But to actually come to a full conclusion about what I think of it in terms of ride quality, I'd really want it back here on crappy familiar roads back in the UK. What do you think of the Addict? Are you devastated there's not a rim brake option? Are you delighted by the integration? Are you bored of bikes which all look the same? Or is it just the perfect package? But please let me know what you think of the bike in the comments, and if you have any questions, leave those there too, and I'll do my best to get back to you. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you get notifications whenever we upload a new video. Goodbye!